Hans Zimmer, in and of himself, is a much bigger conversation that we'll have to have in a different video altogether.
Wow.
Hey everybody, my name is Michael Stephenson. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You are currently watching my art/entertainment industry series here on my channel, in which I talk mainly about film, television, a little sprinkling of publishing, as well as some music in there as well. And tonight, well, first off, let me say that if this is your first video here, I would ask that you please go back and view some of my previous videos. For a lot of my opening videos, we're talking somewhere around 30-ish videos. They're foundational videos. So I've been trying to establish a particular lingo or language here on the channel to build up a sort of shorthand with you guys so that I can mention a particular phrase or word and you just automatically know exactly what it is that I mean and what I am talking about. So please go back and watch those videos if you haven't seen them. So tonight let me first off start by saying this, a few things, just sort of housekeeping out of the way. I apologize if the light is a little bit more blinding in this video than it usually is. I've been trying to adjust it, haven't been able to do it quite right, but then also it is getting warmer, so expect to not see me sitting next to a nice warm cozy fire because air conditioning and all that stuff. So with that being said, tonight I just want to make a fairly quick video, hopefully it's quick, where I talk about Marvel music. So I was wondering, let me start by saying this. We are definitely going to have a full-on month in which we talk about music, and that's going to be music both within film/television as well as music within the actual recording industry, right? So our music recording artists, Beyonce's and Taylor Swift's and all that stuff. So I'm probably going to mention a lot of the same stuff that I'm going to talk about here, there, but that's going to be most likely months away. And, some of you may tune into that stuff, maybe not, I don't know. But I've been wanting to do the music thing for a very long time, as well as pretty much all the ideas that I have in these videos. I've been thinking about them for a very long time, mainly because of the fact that I'm a little tired of, well, there's just the music in and of itself, in my opinion, is kind of a loaded topic to really focus in on for film and television specifically, but music in general is a loaded topic. So we all know at this point, or at least we should all know, that for many, many years, and well, I'm going to make the argument a little bit later in the video, but we know that for many, many years, Marvel was called out as being one of the things that Marvel was called out for is they were called out for not having the best music within their films. And that was an absolutely accurate and correct call out. Most of Marvel's soundtracks, most of their original scores for their films are really blah. Like they're kind of nothing. They don't really leave a very huge lasting impression, and they're just not really good. Honestly, to be fair, they kind of remind me of a lot of 90s action films, in that most action films in the 90s, really most action films throughout most of history, kind of had the same kind or the same style of music. There was yeah, they just have the same style of music. I just don't even know what to say. You can, if you turned off the dialogue and then didn't look at an action film from the 80s or 90s, and you just let it play in the background and you only heard the music, I guarantee you could go for a full day of being up and just listening to movies, and you would not in any way, shape, or form be able to tell when one film ended and another began. That is kind of the exact same thing that has been happening for years with Marvel's films, specifically with the soundtracks. Now, I'm trying to remember if Iron Man, the very first Iron Man, had a good soundtrack, and I gotta say no, because I can't remember anything about it. The weirdest part, I apologize if I'm sort of struggling to find a line on what to say and not really putting my paragraphs together in a way that builds because God, the music is just, I'm just so a little, I'm just so rocked by the whole idea. For starters, music is an incredibly important part of the filmmaking and film going experience. If you all remember, or if you know anything about film history, then you know that the music, we actually had music in films before we had audible dialogue, right? So all the dialogue that we did have was on cue cards and whatnot during the silent film era. But the films weren't actually silent. They had backing tracks, they had music to go along with them that played well into the films. And so to me, to get the music, to get the soundtrack, the score wrong, or to make it something that is just it's a non-factor in many ways to the overall storytelling. It's very off-putting, especially for a big budget Hollywood hit like what we have seen Marvel create through the MCU. So for many years, of course, I was wondering why exactly it was that Marvel's films didn't really sound all that great, to be honest with you. And then there was a YouTuber that came out years ago, and he did a official big time sort of soundtrack comparison and things, and he was talking about the blandness of most of the soundtracks. And for the most part, he was right on almost everything. Is that it felt a lot like, I don't know. It just felt a lot like most of the movies never wanted to stray from the God. I apologize. I'm forgetting the actual um, terminology that they use. But basically, when cutting a movie, when they're first editing a movie to show to the studio execs and whatnot, what happens is that, and this has been around for years, of course, what happens is that they will, because they have, a lot of times films have yet to hire the music people. That generally is one of the last things that they do, hire a composer, if they even hire one at all. What generally happens is that they will use a sample track or a score that basically already exists out there for another movie or TV show or what have you, and they'll just put that into the movie and have that sort of play just so that the producers can get a sort of feel for the overall scene, because the music in a film oftentimes helps to set the tone both emotionally as well as thematically within a scene, from scene to scene. And so they'll put these tracks in there. And one of the things that this guy was saying in his video is that it seemed like there were a lot of people who maybe fell in love with those tracks, so much so that they were like, okay, just make something similar to that. And admittedly, I am somewhat guilty of this myself. When writing my some of my books or screenplay or what have you, whatever I'm writing, I oftentimes will go to soundtracks and whatnot that already exist as well. And I will, in some ways, choreograph in my mind the action and the scenes based on that track. So it is a problem. Yeah, it is something I'll probably have to stop doing, but y'all have to realize it is a very difficult thing to stop that kind of habit, because the music can so very well inspire a scene or inspire the way that you write something or that you film something, that is difficult to break away from that. And I can understand then why studio producers and studio executives would also see a rough cut of the film where the director is just trying to show them that this is the tone that I've set for this film, this is where we're going with it, etc. And everybody feel so, I guess, fall in love with the product that they've created all the way up to that point so far, even if it is a rough cut, fall in love with it so much that they say, okay, but we want to either keep this music or we want something that's very similar to that music. So I think that's kind of one of the reasons why the MCU's soundtracks have for many years sounded so bland, is that it seemed like they just grabbed some rando action movie soundtrack, maybe from the 90s or maybe from the 2000s, wherever, and they just sort of put that in as a sample track to show to the producers. And then the producers was just like, yeah, okay, that just sounds fine. And even more composers themselves have come out and they said that, yeah, this is actually a big problem, uh, because the because once the composer generally is hired on, some directors, and of course every director is different. Uh, Christopher Nolan, I believe, in a famous story that he tends to tell, or that he's told more than a few times, for the film Interstellar, he just gave the he already number one, he already knew the composer that he wanted to work with. Of course, it was Hans Zimmer. He had worked with him numerous times before on the Dark Knight series as well as Inception already. So he got to the film Interstellar, excuse me. But before he even filmed it, he gave the script to Hans Zimmer and just said, whatever you are inspired to do, this is not space opera, but it's space grandiosity. It is space exploration. It is innovation. It is inspired. It's space inspired, etc. And that's what we got. Basically, when you listen to that soundtrack, it feels inspiring. It feels sort of this mixture of uplifting and awe that comes from it. The Marvel movies, again, I think that's definitely where they suffered, to where composers came in and they looked around, and I think a lot of them kind of feel the way that other facets of filmmaking and other filmmakers, because I consider composers to be part of filmmakers. When I say filmmakers, I just mean anybody involved in making a film and taking it from an idea in somebody's head all the way to the finished project on the screen. So everybody's a filmmaker, the actors, the costume designers, everybody. I feel like composers feel the same way that a lot of directors and writers and producers do in the industry, is that in some ways, it's not that the comic book movies are beneath them, but that Marvel specifically does not inspire inspiration. Like they don't really allow you, it seems, to do something truly unique and creative with what's going on, mainly because the films aren't as committed to a vision out. They're not committed to a vision that is too far from what everybody just thinks a comic book movie is. So with that in mind, I think that some of the best soundtracks that they've done are for the movies that take the idea of a comic book movie and elevate it or change it in some way. We all know that one of the best soundtracks that they've ever done is Captain America Winter Soldier. Not only is the one standout sound, or the one standout piece of scoring that we all know, that of the Winter Soldier himself, his sort of approach, his sort of evil villainy kind of theme song that he has, not only is that brilliant, but then you look at, or you listen to, in this case, the rest of the film, and it does sound incredibly patriotic. It does sound like something that is militaristic, but it's not militaristic in a boring kind of way. It's militaristic in a sort of elevated kind of sound to it. There's just something so, it draws you in. The whole soundtrack draws you in, and that's exactly what you want to do in a spy thriller. Again, Captain America is not just a superhero film, but it takes that spy thriller intrigue that was so prominent and prevalent within the 1970s and 60s, and it elevates that, and it combines the two together to make something new. You also go to Thor Ragnarok. I think Thor Ragnarok, and mind you, I skipped over Guardians of the Galaxy, because again, Guardians of the Galaxy, it is something that thrives on songs that are already made, right? So it doesn't really, as a matter of fact, I don't even know. Well, I guess it does. It does have its own original score, but for the most part, most of the times when you think Guardians of the Galaxy, you think of all the different songs that they've chosen throughout the different generations and decades of songs that they have there, that are commercial songs. But you go to Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok also had a very interesting soundtrack. And I say that to start saying this, is that I think that as of late, post post Thor Ragnarok, the soundtracks have most certainly improved in Marvel. I don't think that they have gotten to a level to where every movie or even every TV show has a great soundtrack. By all means, no. But I do think that they've improved significantly since the early days, phase one, phase two, little bit of phase three. They've improved to where the soundtracks are no longer completely dismissible. Thor Ragnarok's, not only his the soundtrack, but also some of the other songs that they chose. What is it? The dang it, I cannot even remember the original band that did it. But the immigrant song when Thor is attacking. That was, in my opinion, a rather inspired choice, and I think it was great. They used it, of course, in the trailer for that movie as well. Taking the music from that film and placing it in almost any other film within the MCU would not have necessarily worked for those other films, which is actually a great thing. It's one of the things that I kind of look for. The fact that the soundtrack is not so carbon copy that it can just work in any sort of movie. It specifically works in that movie specifically because that movie is geared in almost every way, shape, and form, in tonality, in character development, in narrative structure, in thematic structure. It works there. Everything is in a high flow state, so to speak, as they say. Everything is working communicatively. It's a much better way of producing the music for a film, as opposed to making music that seems like it can kind of just go into anything. This also, of course, you have the music for Black Panther as well. Although, to be fair, I have interesting feelings a lot about Ludwig. Ludwig Göransson, I believe is his name, is how you pronounce it. He won the Oscar for Black Panther. The music, well, I have interesting feelings about Black Panther to begin with. Let me say that as well. I'll make a video on how I really felt about Black Panther and its sequel, probably in the coming weeks. When, I don't know, but it'll be out soon. But I really enough didn't like the soundtrack, but I did appreciate it for its creativity. So it wasn't the greatest of soundtracks to me, but it was, just from a creative standpoint, it was much better than most of the soundtracks that we see throughout most of the MCU. Captain Marvel, unfortunately, they kind of went back to where I can't remember a single lick of the soundtrack. I just can't remember it. And one of the things that I do when judging soundtracks is that basically I say this: I walk every day. I walk for miles and miles and miles. And while I'm walking, I listen to music. I walk because, I can't jog or run because I have too many injuries, back, hip, knees. So I walk for exercise, and I'll listen to music. And most of the time I'm listening to soundtracks of various films and television shows that I have enjoyed. If I don't feel the desire to push myself to listen to the soundtrack for a particular film or TV show, to me, it's not a good soundtrack. It's just not. For instance, the amount of times that I've listened to Interstellar's soundtrack, off the charts. The amount of times that I've listened, weirdly enough, to The Dark Knight Rises soundtrack, also off the charts. Man of Steel, off the charts. The amount of times I listened to Captain Marvel, zero. Just not hitting on me. Just not hitting anything for me. So then you come to, of course, the biggest film in the franchise, and that is the Avengers films. I gotta be honest with you guys. The first Avengers film, in my opinion, it wasn't even, even that soundtrack did not really hit on almost anything for me. It just wasn't there for me. They, of course, came up with a theme song for the Avengers, but I just didn't remember hearing that almost at all in the film. Same thing kind of went for Avengers Age of Ultron, to where I wasn't impressed with the music at all in either of the first two Avengers films. And if I'm being honest, I feel like that somewhat affected my enjoyment of both of the films. The fact that there was just not a great there was just the music was lacking to such an extent that even the scenes that felt like they should have had more impact really didn't have more impact to me. And so then you get finally to the Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame, and they have some pretty great music. One of the songs, weirdly enough, that stands out to me is, and I apologize, I don't know the actual name of the track. I do know that I've listened to it a few times while walking. But one of the tracks, weirdly enough, that stands out to me is that end garden track. The track that you hear, the music that you hear, the song that you hear as Thanos is on his planet in his garden, and he just looks out and he's like, yeah, this is good. I'm finished. I've done my work. I've done what I came to do. That is it's such a great track because it feels and sounds so almost innocent. It kind of reminds me of just a nice sunny day where the sun is going down in the Midwest. It sort of in some ways references a simpler life, which is exactly what Thanos is now tuning himself to after having accomplished the things that he accomplished, after having, doing the snap, etc. And yet, of course, it's also such a beautifully sad song as well. It's very short and it's very simple and it's very to the point, but it packs a very good punch. And then, of course, in Endgame, the fact that the Avengers theme is, and I want to say it's Alan Fine, but that for some reason I think that Alan Fine is a writer. I don't really know though, but I think it's somebody named Alan. He really punches the Avengers theme song in Endgame, in that film. You really hear it and it truly gets into you. And that was the first time. That was the first time after, what was that, 11 years? That was the first time that I truly felt something when hearing the Avengers theme in Endgame. And of course, it's punched even greater during the credits. Of course, when they're doing the signatures, right, of the characters, and they're showing you that, this is the signature for Robert Downey Jr. This is the signature for Chris Hemsworth, etc. For the big time characters. It really feels it really, the music adds another layer of emotionality to it that you wouldn't normally get if the music was just sort of ho-hum. And so then we're moving on, and I think that we are at a point in which we might be doing a hit and a miss almost every single time. One of the biggest hits that I absolutely love, probably the most, is the soundtrack for Loki. That of the Disney Plus series. It's only got 12 episodes over the course of 2 seasons. But I believe her name is Natalie Holt, which, as an aside, I actually love that it's a woman because you don't get too many music, full-on composers for film or television. What you usually get is, yes, you'll get like a songwriter here and there, but they will write the songs of maybe a pop type of song, right? So you get like the Lady Gagas and things of that nature. She wrote the majority of the songs, of the original songs for A Star Is Born. You'll get somebody like that, but they very rarely seem to let women compose full films or TV shows in this case. And Natalie Holt, I think that's her name. Don't quote me on that. I think that's her name. But she just does an amazing job with Loki. It has one of the best soundtracks. Season 1 and 2 has some of the best soundtracks. It's got that. It's such a weird sounding soundtrack. Of course, it's got the Nordic sounds to it to honor the Norse culture and the Norse mythology from which Loki derives. But it's such a great soundtrack that, in my opinion, I'm thinking like, God, I really hope that after Loki is done, and it seems like it is, I don't think it'll be coming back for season 3. Now that Loki is done, I really hope that they allow her to do more within the MCU, because I really am intrigued on what it is that she might do next. I don't even know. I don't know who did the soundtrack for the Marvels, but regardless of how you feel about the film, I actually thought the soundtrack was pretty decent. And I think I unfortunately I can't remember the one for Miss Marvel, but I'm fairly certain I also liked that soundtrack, as well as the one for Moon Knight, as well. The Disney Plus series starring Oscar Isaac. Of course, I liked the soundtrack for WandaVision as well. Again, I think that they're doing a pretty good job of hits and misses, to where, as opposed to in previous phases, especially when they were just doing the films, it was very much so a miss, 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 and then maybe you would get one that was like, oh, this is an interesting little standout. But for the most part, it was just miss after miss after miss. So I do think, like I said, that they're doing much better on it. If I was to give them advice on what to improve, I would think that, again, the first thing is use some more in-house people, right? Don't just let Natalie Holt go and do a completely different project that isn't Marvel, and you just lose her forever. Yes, of course, composers can be very prolific, so they can just do a lot of projects, but don't just like let her go and just let her go forever. Give her something else, because I really would love to see her work. And Clint Mansell, or Mansell, I don't really know how to pronounce his last name, but he was the man who did the soundtrack for Captain America: Winter Soldier. Listen, I don't understand why he was not given more work within the MCU. Like I said, Captain America: Winter Soldier was the first, in my opinion, it was the first standout soundtrack for Marvel. And it just seemed like after that, they never really gave him anything else to do. And at the time, I remember being kind of ticked about it, because I was like, this is a perfect moment to give him the to give him the right to score the next Avengers film, in the same way that, what are their names? The Russo brothers. In the same way that the Russo brothers went from Captain America: Winter Soldier, Captain America: Civil War, and then the last two Avengers films, and as well as the writers for that. Y'all have to also remember that, and we will be talking about the writers in an upcoming video, sometime maybe next week or the week after. But all of those people, they were upgraded. Okay, they went from being on one standalone series to being on the big time Avengers series. And I was like, why did Clint Mansell not? Why did that not happen for him? I'm confused on as to why it didn't. I think that he probably could have done some very interesting things with the Avengers, but they chose to go with something else. And so I'm like, well, okay, I guess that's fine. But I would say, again, if they can get Clint Mansell back to do something, I think he would maybe fit well with Thunderbolts. Obviously, he could fit well with the latest Captain America, Brave New World. Yeah, I think that there's places to put him. And then finally, so keep it in-house. And then the other idea that I would have is that I think, because they are still such a big franchise and they're still going to be reaching into various areas of the comic books, cosmic, magic still, government, science fiction, I think that it is a great time to actually start a composer's room. Now, again, I don't think I've ever heard of a composer's room being a thing. There is such a thing as a writer's room, okay? And for those of you who don't know, the writer's room actually is oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, but it can be two different things. So the first thing is that you have a writer's room on a television show, and it works like any other writer's room, in which you have the creator of the show. He or she is usually the head of the writer's room, and they sort of make, along with maybe two other head writers or senior writers, they will sort of craft an overall overarching plot or narrative for a particular season. And then from there on, the other writers will sort of pitch their own ideas, either for shows or for characters, or sometimes it's even just as small as, like, if it's a comedy show, they'll pitch a particular joke or what have you, or setup, etc., etc. But then you also have this other thing of a writer's room, in which basically for these big franchises, you can have a bunch of writers in there trying to figure out how all of these characters and all these different different movies within a franchise can work together. So it's almost the same thing as what they do for TV, but it's a little different because each writer is going to potentially be writing their own full-on movie, 2-hour plus movie, right? So it's a little bit different. But why not do that for composers? Like I think it would be, of course, this is a great time for Hollywood to start trying new things. I think it would be a very interesting idea if you got the composers and say, if you got like a couple of composers into a room at one time and they started just throwing around ideas of like, okay, we have a science fiction movie that you're going to be working on. We have a spy thriller that you're going to be working on. We have a magic movie that you're going to be working on. Let's play around with the different sounds. Let's get inspired. Let's inspire each other. And let's then come up with a completely, totally new sound for the next Avengers team. This new Avengers team obviously is not going to look anything like the old Avengers team. So why not have a new sound? Why not have a new theme for them rather than trying to go with the old theme? I think it would be a great thing to do, a great thing, especially since they have ventured off more into exploring different cultures and not just, different characters, right? Like Tony Stark, Captain America, they were both white American dudes. But what does it look like to mix Shang-Chi with Black Panther? What is it like? What does it look like to not only mix their culture, but to mix their music and how that is going to potentially play into it? I would just love to see them do something like that, do something more creative with the whole sound design, specifically when it comes to music for the MCU. So I think that's kind of all that I wanted to say in this video. What do you guys think of the MCU's musical taste as of late? I know, well, what do you think of them just overall? Obviously, again, the earlier music, not that great, but I feel like as of late, they've been doing some pretty good stuff, even if the movies have not necessarily been hitting on anything. Even if the movies have not been that great, and even if some of the TV shows haven't been your favorites, have you liked the music? And where do you think that they can improve on it? Anyways, I don't have a everybody. So while I don't have an official sign off yet, I guess I should do the whole please like, comment, share, and if you so desire and you want to see more, subscribe. But more importantly, I will ask that you please go and purchase one of my books. They are mostly ebooks and pretty much they are all under $10. See if any of my work is actually any good, if it lives up to any of the things that I'm talking about here on my channel, specifically with the entertainment industry videos. So please go purchase my books. All of my links are down below. Thank you.